In this lesson, we're going to discuss vulnerability reporting. Vulnerability reporting is the process of documenting and communicating details about security weaknesses that were identified in systems or software to the individuals or organizations that are responsible for addressing the issues to be able to ensure that these vulnerabilities are managed discreetly and effectively to prevent exploitation. Now, when it comes to reporting, it's important that these reports use clear, concise, and transparent language to ensure that the vulnerabilities can be well understood by all of the key stakeholders. Now, at the same time, we also need to ensure that communications and the reports themselves remain confidential because they contain an exhaustive list of every known vulnerability inside of our enterprise networks. So, as we focused on reporting vulnerabilities, we are going to be discussing internal reporting, external reporting, reporting as part of responsible disclosure, and the importance of keeping vulnerability reporting information confidential and safe from prying eyes. First, we have internal reporting. Internal reporting serves as the first line of defense in the vulnerability management process. Internal reporting involves the identification, documentation, and communication of your organization's vulnerabilities within the organizational structure of your organization. This kind of internal reporting may happen horizontally inside of your organization, where a cybersecurity analyst is providing the results of their vulnerability scans over to your system administrators so that those administrators can begin applying patches or reconfiguring your devices to remediate the vulnerabilities that were found by the analyst. Alternatively, you may also work in a vertical structure where you're creating a weekly report that's being sent upwards to your managers and executives so they can understand the current security posture of the organization's network. In either of these cases, though, the information needs to remain internal to your organization, and in this case, that makes it internal reporting. When you're making an internal report, it's important that your report provides the details and clarity about the vulnerabilities that were being discovered during your scans. Your report should also be timely because rapid reporting can drastically reduce the period of time that your organization is going to be exposed due to a known but unpatched vulnerability inside of your network. Now, another key concern when you're doing internal reporting is that you have properly established the communication paths and protocols that are going to be used when new vulnerabilities are discovered, and the results of a new vulnerability scan is going to be ready to be shared internally across the system administrators, managers, or executives through this new communication path. Second, we have external reporting. Now, external reporting occurs when you need to discuss your vulnerabilities outside of your own organization structure. External reporting is usually going to involve discussions with your vendors, your partners, your customers, or the public at large, depending on the specific vulnerability that we're talking about. Now, one of the most commonly used external reporting methods is to coordinate with your vendor. By engaging with the vendor of your vulnerable system or software first, you're giving them a chance to rectify and remediate the issue, not just for your organization, but for all customers who rely on this vendor's product. Another common form of external reporting and communication is going to occur when you share non-sensitive aspects of that vulnerability with databases like the CVE database or the vendor's own knowledge base or support forum to be able to increase the cybersecurity community's knowledge about this given vulnerability. Also, when you're conducting external reporting, it's important that you ensure that any sensitive details about your systems and the data they contain are not being disclosed if that could put other people at risk. For this reason, it's important to respect the privacy of your employees, your customers, and your vendors when you're discussing potential vulnerabilities with other external organizations. Third, we have to consider reporting in terms of responsible disclosures. Now, responsible disclosure reporting is the art of disclosing vulnerabilities ethically and judiciously to the affected stakeholders before making the announcement to the public at large. Responsible disclosures are focused on collaborating with the entity responsible for the vulnerability in the first place, such as the software developer, so that they can develop a hotfix or a security patch for the vulnerability that you discovered. This is often going to be done as part of a bug bounty program, which is a form of responsible disclosure. Additionally, when you work with the vendor, you should give them a grace period of a few weeks or even possibly a few months in order for them to be able to ensure that they can address the issue and deploy a patch before you make any kind of public announcement. Otherwise, a threat actor would hear your announcement, create an exploit to attack the vendor's customers who are now vulnerable to the new attack that you discovered, and this is going to cause all sorts of problems. When you're conducting responsible disclosure, you need to provide a detailed report to the vendor, including the method you used to exploit the vulnerability so they can reproduce your attack or exploit, the potential impact of the vulnerability if it was exploited, and any proposed mitigations that you would recommend until the vendor has time to release a patch for the vulnerability. For example, if I just discovered a new vulnerability in the Windows file and printer sharing service, I should first go ahead and notify Microsoft as part of their bug bounty or responsible disclosure program. When I do that, I'm going to tell them about the vulnerability I discovered, what the impact is, and any proposed mitigations for it. So, let's pretend that the vulnerability I discovered is only effective against version 1 and version 2 of the SMB protocol, but not version 3. So in this case, the mitigation might be for Microsoft's customers to disable version 1 and version 2 of the SMB protocol. Or if this vulnerability was discovered to be a remote code execution vulnerability, we might make the recommendation that port 445, which is used by SMB, is going to be blocked at the customer's firewall, because that way, if port 445 is closed, only people internal to the organization will be able to use it, and nobody from outside of the organization will be able to access the servers using port 445. This will prevent an external threat actor from exploiting this vulnerability remotely over the internet. These are just some examples of mitigations that could be used until the security patch to plug the hole would be released by Microsoft through the Windows Update service to all of their customers. Now, fourth and finally, we need to discuss the importance of confidentiality in our vulnerability reporting. Confidentiality in our vulnerability reports really is a non-negotiable matter, because the details included in those reports are basically going to give the attacker everything they need in order to circumvent your organization's security appliances and defenses. Think about it like this. You just took the time to draw up some blueprints of your home and then document exactly where all the valuables are in your home. In addition to that, you listed all the security cameras you have, which doors are locked and which ones aren't, which windows are open and which ones aren't, all that kind of stuff. Now, as you're going to work, you accidentally dropped that blueprint on the street and I picked it up. Well, guess what? Now I know exactly how to break into your house and where all the valuables are located, right? Well, the same holds true with our vulnerability reports. After you conduct your vulnerability scans, the report is going to be generated and it's going to contain a list of every vulnerability in your networks, as well as every misconfiguration it finds. In the hands of a threat actor, this is a map that will tell them exactly how to break into your networks and wreak havoc all across your systems. So, when it comes to the confidentiality of your reports, you always want to make sure those reports are being encrypted, and you should use secure storage spaces online if you're going to give access to other people instead of just emailing it around. For example, I could create the report, encrypt it, and then upload it to a password-protected portion of our internal SharePoint or document repository, and then I can send that link by email to the people who need a copy of that report instead of emailing them the PDF of the report directly. This helps to ensure we have securely controlled access to the report instead of people forwarding that email internally or externally of our organization. Additionally, you also want to ensure that your report is only provided to those who have a need-to-know basis. Again, this is another reason why you want to put it on an internal SharePoint portal or other document repository that has access control rights. For example, an accountant who works at your organization probably doesn't need to see the detailed report of all your vulnerabilities, but your system administrators, they probably do because they're going to be patching those vulnerabilities, so they need to know they exist. On the other hand, your executives do have a vested interest and a need to know about the security posture of your network, but they probably don't need the fully detailed 300-page report of every vulnerability that exists in your network because they're not a system administrator and they're not going to be going line by line through the report to patch and mitigate them. Instead, these executives would rather have a 3 to 5 page executive summary of your organization's vulnerabilities that contains much less details and can be shared to a slightly larger audience while still being much easier for them to understand because it relies on summarized information and graphs to highlight your organization's current security posture. Now, it is very important that your reporting remains confidential. Otherwise, exploitation, reputational damage, and even legal repercussions could occur for your organization. After all, a malicious actor could use the report to exploit your disclosed vulnerabilities before they're patched by your system administrators, so we want to make sure we keep those unknown. If your vulnerability report gets posted on social media, for example, this would actually damage your reputation and have the public lose confidence in your organization's ability to securely protect its customers' data. Finally, if that report does get out, you may be subject to legal repercussions due to your existing contracts, industry regulations, or simply being sued by one of your customers if their data is getting exposed due to your negligence release of that vulnerability report, especially if you're working as an external auditor or cybersecurity consultant for that customer. So remember, vulnerability reporting is the last step, but a really important step inside of the organization's vulnerability management program. Vulnerability reporting is the process of documenting and communicating details about security weaknesses identified in software or systems to the individuals or organizations responsible for addressing the issue to ensure that these vulnerabilities are managed discreetly and effectively to prevent exploitation. This vulnerability reporting can be performed internally or externally, as well as part of a responsible disclosure program. Either way, though, your vulnerability reports must be kept encrypted to maintain their confidentiality, and they should only be shared with other people who have a need to know in terms of your organization's existing vulnerabilities and current security posture.